Hey y'all, I'm Sarah. Welcome to another episode of Widow Wit and Wisdom. It is November 2025, and I am just 2 weeks out about from the 9-year anniversary of my husband's suicide. I have this kind of big grief season been doing a lot of journaling and processing like I always do this time of year. But this year I'm doing a grief coaching certification course. I'm getting my grief coaching certification. Yay. But it has made me reflect on things in a very different way. More of a, wow, it's been 9 years without him. Like, how am I still here? And like, how have I done that? And how would I have coached myself through it back then? And so I went back and started like going through my early widowhood journals and notes and things like that. But looking at it more from the perspective of like research and how did I do that and like curiosity. And then, of course, I took even more notes and wrote more journals about it all. But I started to really see a theme in there. And of course, I'm writing all these notes about it again from a what was getting me through it kind of standpoint. And I started to see a theme of certain things. And the three top things that I came up with that have gotten me through these last 9 years as a widow and losing Jeff to suicide come down to God, guts, and grace. And so then I was like, okay, but like, where'd those come from? Like, I can see that my faith was fully entrenched, even though I had lost my beliefs in the church that I had been raised with. But my faith never wavered. Like I was praying the whole time and I knew God had my back and I was seeing it. So like, how did I just have that? Because especially in early widowhood, that's a time I feel like when a lot of widows fall away from the church and from their faith, it's so easy to just be pissed off at God and be like, you don't exist if you didn't save my husband, or just to be angry at God. And I never was. And I was like curious about that. Like what was it? Because if ever I had a reason, like that was it. And I'd been really pissed off at God before. So why wouldn't I this time? And I really started to dig into that. So this may be a couple episodes to get through the God, the guts, and the grace, but we will start with the God of it all, because I think that a lot of people look at me because I don't go to church or things like that and think I don't have faith and that I don't have beliefs. You're very wrong. Allow me to explain why. It all comes down to all the God, the guts, and the grace that I have literally come down to one thing, and it is my mother. Totally my mother and her dementia journey. So I thought I would just pick it all apart, the research I've done, the notes I've written, in case it can help anybody out here. Maybe you can gain a little God, guts, and grace too. So yeah, let's jump into this first part of this episode of God, Guts, and Grace here on Widow Wit and Wisdom. Buckle up, Buttercup. Okay, gonna be real. This may turn into several episodes because honestly, the whole God part may take an entire episode, because I have got to share with y'all my mom's dementia journey, because that is truly where I solidified my faith, where my guts came from, the ability to persevere, and like how I learned to just get through things. Yeah, this is probably going to take up the whole episode, so we may have to get to the guts and grace in other episodes. But hopefully we can all learn something. I sure know I did from this one. Trigger warning, and yeah, just trigger warning because me. Hello. No judgment. I'm not going to judge you. Please don't judge me. Be kind. Okay, so first things first, let's start with this. I am not one who like discusses my faith and my beliefs and stuff like that. Like I am not going to wave my Bible around or my beliefs around and discuss them with other people or berate them. That's just not who I am. I am always curious about, I just want to gain more perspective. And after my husband died, when my beliefs in religion changed, did a lot of research into other faiths, religions, cultures, how they handled grief and suicide and things like that. So I just wanted as much perspective as I could. But in going back into my journals and trying to gain perspective on where I was, especially in my early widowhood, it has been so interesting because then I had to dig further back into my old journals and notes from my mom's dementia journey. And again, found that to be really what made it possible for me to get through, especially those early days of grief. I don't think I could have had I not done the things I did, witnessed the things I did, and been part of the things I was part of during mom's dementia journey that like really formed me and protected me in my grief when Jeff died. First thing you need to understand in all of this mom's dementia journey is my mom. My mom was an absolute force of nature, not just as a person, but as like her faith. My mother just loved God, loved Jesus. She was always praying. Oftentimes you would find her sitting in her recliner in her room in the dark and just like her lips were moving. She was praying, like she was real relaxed and she was praying. That was just who mom was. She did not need to beat you with her faith. She simply exuded it. She was involved in everything church related, just unapologetic about who she was and what she believed in. And just really just a walking angel, honestly. But force of nature, because she just got stuff done. She figured things out. There was really nothing mom couldn't handle or do. For instance, my parents moved 17 times in my dad's 30-year career with the company he worked for. And dad was never present for a single one of those moves. Mom did it all. She was literally just a powerhouse. And so to have her struck down with dementia was a rough blow. And so young. She was only 58. So that really tested my faith for the first time. I had been raised by two parents that were super involved in the church, super involved in Christianity, and always involved in some sort of Bible study or reading some new book. And basically, my dad could be like a religious studies major at this point, or a theologian. But I was raised with that. So I was raised with certain beliefs. And I clung to those. I leaned on those just like my parents did. But when mom I knew I was definitely not like the perfect Christian. And so when mom got dementia, it really threw my faith for a loop. That was when I fought with God. That's when I threw down and just said, if you can do this to this woman who has followed you endlessly, relentlessly, perfectly, if you can do this to her, then like my imperfect ass has zero chance. I don't want to believe in you then. So that was where my fight with my faith came in, not when Jeff died. It came in those very early years of dementia. The other thing you have to understand about my mom's dementia journey is she had dementia for around 25 to 30 years, which is highly unusual because the average person only lives with dementia for about 4 to 8 years. It was a long journey. And there was a whole lot of God in there, a whole lot of miracles. My fight with my faith did not last that long. God very quickly said, just sit down and calm down. Let me show you. But it did. It took me, I really, in that time period, was like, I would go into my Bible studies and stuff because I was involved in the church that we went to. I would go to the Bible studies and stuff, but I was like challenging God, like going, all right, show me what you got, buddy. Like, I believe in the miracles. I believe you can heal her, but you got to show me what you got because I'm really losing faith here. If you can do that to her again, you got to show me. And a funny thing happened when I started seeking like those answers and things like that. I, of course, was like digging into the passages and going back and reading my journals now from this more research kind of perspective, going into that, like challenging. I'm looking for answers. I want to know what this, like, why are you making her suffer like this? Like, why does she deserve this? Why do we deserve this? And I kept just finding that with big suffering comes big miracles. And I was like, okay, all right. I'm going to start looking for the miracles. I'm going to start looking for the purpose. in the suffering. And when I did, it just became truly miraculous. You cannot make up the miracles that happened in my mom's dementia journey. So let me hop in here. I have a timeline that I wrote years ago, so I'm just going to run down this timeline of mom's dementia journey. So in 1993, I was graduating high school. My mom was 52 years old. She was taking care of her mother who had dementia. And that was when we really started to see very early signs. Her temper was a little bit shorter. She could not smell anymore. My mom was an excellent cook, and she burnt a pot of beans, like to the point, like the whole house was filled with smoke, and burnt bean smell stayed in the walls for like years. It may still smell. I don't even know. But that was when we first started to see things slide sideways with her. But it didn't progress real quickly right then. It was really 1999 before mom got her diagnosis. So she was 58 years old. That's only 8 years older than I am right now. But yeah, she was about probably 6 years symptomatic by the time she actually got her diagnosis. And while we knew she was symptomatic in those years before diagnosis, it was really with the diagnosis where my faith started to slip. Hers never did, though. She was praying harder than ever. And mom just kept saying, we're just going to pray for a miracle, for a miracle. But she was actually very active in her healing process. Like once she had that diagnosis, mom became very determined to do everything she could to retain as much brain power and neuron movement as she could. She was actively doing things like finding new ways to do things with numbers, because that was a big struggle for her at that point. And she had been a mathematical genius, so for her to not be able to do numbers was big. So she would start playing cards, working with numbers, doing word puzzles, and she was setting reminders for herself. She was actively trying to be okay. And of course, this whole time we're all praying like, please God, send us something, send us a miracle, tell us it's not this, but it's actually something else. And then about 4 years after her diagnosis, she started to really slip more. Like she didn't want to partake in the conversation, just more quiet, couldn't follow the conversation as well. And then, and this is not a joke, it was like a total God moment, divine timing, answer to prayer, whatever you want to call it. But one of those moments that like my dad and I call like the miracles or God moments of mom's dementia story. My dad heard about this water system that like the Japanese swim team athletes were using, and they had seen some kind of, I don't know. He ended up getting his hands on this water filter and doing kind of the, whatever that protocol, drinking this water, like a bunch of this water to flush out your system kind of thing was. And so he and mom did that. Mom was all on board with that. And she started doing it, set timers for herself and had her jugs of water and knew she had to drink them. And she really worked hard on that and focused on it. And we saw a difference. Like no one at first wanted to say anything, but mom became more present, more aware, more conversational again. And so we had a couple year period in there where we actually had mom back, and we were all thinking, oh, thank God, like he answered our prayers. And then we had a very cool divine timing thing that happened during that when mom started to get a little bit better and more conversational. My dad had heard that the guy that had developed this water filtration system that he was using with her was going to be something in New Orleans. And so he and mom tickets, and she wanted to go. She was well enough. She was like, I want to go. And she said she wanted to talk to him. And dad was like, I don't know if you're going to be able to talk to him, but we'll go. Mom was pretty focused on the fact that she wanted to talk to him. And dad just kept trying to tell her, probably that's not going to happen. This is like a big convention. And they were walking just randomly through a hallway or breezeway or something. And they actually were like talking to someone, and that guy that developed that water filtration system walked up to talk to the man that they were talking to. And mom got to have a full-blown conversation with him, and she told him what this had done for her and was like asking him, like, is this possible that this is what is working? And I had a full-blown conversation with him. Now, if you had told me that, and that was like 4 years after her diagnosis, 10 years symptomatic. So just one of those like God moments, divine timing. Like, how do you explain that? But then the blank stare started to come back a few years later, about 6 years in after diagnosis, 12 years symptomatic, around 2004, 2005. She was in her mid 60s, and she started to space out again. And that's when, for the first time in mom's like Alzheimer's dementia journey, that the rage and anger started to set in, and what my dad calls the demon possession moments. She got scary. She got really scary. And this is when my fight with God, I was just like, hell no, this is bullshit that you would do this to these, like, my parents of all people. And I really wanted to just like be done with it. But again, he just kept showing me like, no, you've got this. But yeah, she got really brutal. And one of my biggest struggles with that was, I had been fine with mom having dementia all those years. I actually had fun with it. Like, she didn't know who I was anymore. Couldn't remember all the bad shit I had done, and that she didn't like me. She didn't know me. So I got to be whoever was going to make her happy that day, which I loved. At one point, though, I had gone with my kids in the summertime to stay with mom so my dad could go and teach vacation Bible school up at the church. And she had one of those moments. She was really fractious anytime dad wasn't around. And I knew that. I was prepared for it. But this day, I could not get her to calm down. And then my mother, I couldn't get her to focus on me anymore. And she turned on my sons. And she was yelling at my oldest son, who handled it beautifully. But she was yelling at my son, where is Larry? Where is Larry? Take me to him. And my son was just like, he's not here. He's up at the church. I can't drive. And I'm standing like in between them. And my mom, all of a sudden, I thought she was going to pause there when he was like, I can't take you. I can't drive. I thought she was going to pause and like maybe be okay. And instead, she was just pausing so that she could rear back. She was going to hit him. She was like going to attack him. And when I tell you, in that moment, like, the conversation I had with God was fast and hard. It was, oh my God. First of all, forgive me for what I am about to do, but I cannot believe this, but I am about to hit my mother. And when she went to swing at him, I had to stop her. You weren't going to touch my kid. I had to choose the mom that I was over her, over my mom, and that was not easy. But yeah, my protective mama won, and my mom with dementia did not. But that made it, that was a real struggle for me. Like, how could God take her away from these grandbabies that I know she loved, that she would never do that to? And so I really struggled again with my faith. But boy, did he show me. So after that incident, and then especially just with the rages that continued to happen, my dad had been doing this with her for probably about 12 years, 6 to 7 into her diagnosis, or about 8 really into her diagnosis. And he'd been doing it by himself. I was helping when I could, but I had 2 kids at home. They were in elementary, junior high age during all this. And so we had busy schedules. And I was coming to their house as often as I could, but at that time, they lived about an hour and a half away from me. Dad was exhausted. I was exhausted. It was getting really dangerous. I was just like, it breaks my heart, but I can't have the kids around her anymore. And that was hard. So I was praying hard, but my prayers changed about then. And like literally every time I went for a run, which was a lot back then because like I was in training for a couple half marathons that I had coming up, I was like praying the whole time I was running, just please God, if you're not going to give us the miracle, like you're not going to heal her, okay, whatever, but send us some help. Like we need some help. Just please somehow, I don't know, convince Dad to put her in a home. Like we just need a break, just a little bit, just something. And funny, because God totally hears my prayers, by the way, and he just loves to show me that, because this is when the just insane moments really started to happen. I cannot make this up. the crazy moments began. So about 7, 8 years in, Dad finally decides that he's going to put Mom in a care facility, but he's going to do it down here at the farm where she grew up, in the one where her mother had been, where they had put her mom. And I was very glad about that, for his sake, for my sake, for her sake. But I knew taking her was going to be a problem, because again, she was at that point. If she could not see Dad, she would lose it. And so I knew dropping her off was going to be a problem. And I was just so terrified that if she resisted it at all, that Dad was going to change his mind. And while I was like, it is totally his choice and I will support whatever he does. Yeah, I really wanted this for him, he needed a break. And so I was praying hard, like that whole drive on the way to drop her off, that this was going to go well. I was like, thank you, God, that we're doing this, but please just let this actually happen. Please let this actually keep her calm. And so we get there and we get checked into the facility. We go in her room, and her dad's chair, my grandfather's like recliner, had been put in there, and a couple other little things around the room. And she's looking around the room, and she was pretty calm like the whole time, just good with it, just looking around. And she recognizes that as her dad's chair, and kind of says something about that, and then sits down in it. And everybody's in the room. It was myself, my dad, and the director of the facility. We're going to get to her. That's another one of the angels in this story. But Dad had to go fill out the paperwork. That's why I was there, because we knew that there was going to be probably about an hour in there where they had to go over her meds and process her in and all of that kind of stuff. And so Dad wanted me to sit there with her. Now, I knew that the minute she didn't see him, it was probably going to get ugly. There was going to be so I was ready, but I think I was just like on the edge of the bed, and I was watching her. I was just watching her as she like looked around the room, like Dad and the director left, and I was just waiting on her to notice that he wasn't there anymore, because she was looking around the room, and then she would sit back, and then she would look around the room. And the whole time, I don't think I've ever prayed this hard in my life. I was just like, God, please just keep her calm. Keep her calm. Don't let her notice. Keep her calm. Make this go fast. Please do something. Please just keep this situation in control. And all of a sudden she does. She looks at me and she said, "Where's Larry?" And I said, "He's just down the hall. He's going to be right back." Because I knew she'd forget in a second. And she kind of went, "Oh, okay." And leans back for a second. And I thought, oh, we're good. We were not good. She started, all of a sudden she said, "Where's Larry?" And she like leaned forward really fast, and she had her hands gripped on the chair, and I knew the fight was coming. And when I was like, Jesus, take the wheel. I don't know what to do. God, just do something right now, because I cannot let this get out of control. I never moved. Okay. I was literally sitting on the side of the bed having this conversation in my head with God. And the most unbelievable thing happened. My mom had started to get up in this very angry face, just contorted in fury, rage. And she never fully made it out of the chair. She started to rise up, arms down on the sides of the chair, and started to rise up. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I swear, and I thought I was losing my mind as this was happening. But I am just a constant litany of just, please, God, stop this rage. Please, God, stop this rage. And and all of a sudden, it was like she just sank back into the chair. Like she relaxed back into the chair. She put her arms down, and she put her head back, and her lips started moving almost like she was praying, like I had seen her my entire childhood. And she was completely relaxed. And I am looking at this situation, because I was poised to, at that point, I'm still praying, but I was ready to jump up off the bed, because I knew she was going to come at me, and I didn't want her to go for the door and disrupt everything. But all of a sudden she just relaxed back into that chair. And I'm just sitting there. I like sat back on the edge of the bed, and I'm like, what is happening? What just happened? And I'm looking at her, because I cannot believe that she just went from this full blown rage to we're relaxed in the chair. What are we doing? And I'm looking at her and I just see what I can only describe like an angel or something behind her. I just saw what looked like hands on her shoulders, holding her back gently in that chair, and like something standing behind her, or like a misty figure standing behind her. And I was like, I just lost my mind, didn't I? This is like a panic attack. I am dying right now. I'm having a stroke. What is happening? And I was just like, oh my God. And I just sat there frozen like that, looking at her. And again, waiting. Like a part of me was in awe of what was happening. And the other part of me is still like waiting, it just in such disbelief and waiting on her to spring back up out of that chair and be angry again. But she had her eyes closed and mouth open, fully relaxed. And just, again, what I can only describe as these like hands on her shoulders, like someone was comforting her if you were standing behind the recliner. It was crazy. And I could not move. I just sat there in awe and panic, like thanking God for it, being like, what is this? And I've totally lost my mind. This is not happening. But yeah, somehow I prayed an angel into that room. And so she stayed that way. Like everybody in the room stayed that way for, I would say, probably 45 minutes to an hour. That never vanished. And I was just scared to move, honestly. Again, I was like, my mind was blown. And I was just very unsure of what was happening. And I didn't want to disturb her or set her off. And so my dad finally comes back in and he opens the door. And as he opens the door, I am in his direct view and she was off to his side. And so he opens the door and he looks, and as he opened the door, I realized like the room was foggy. Or I thought it was just my vision. Like I was like dizzy. Like I said, I thought I was having a stroke. And I'm like, everything's blurry. And Dad kind of looks around and he says, is everything okay in here? And I'm just looking at him like, what? And then everything was clear. Like all that smokiness was gone. And so I was like, yeah, we're good. We're good. I was not going to admit what just happened. I was like, we're good. Like she's good. She's calm. And so he got her all checked in and everything. And we go to leave. I went out to the car before him so he could say goodbye to her. And I get in the car and my dad gets in the car and it's real quiet because I wasn't sure where he was at with it. And we get about halfway back out here to the farm. And he says to me, he said, what happened? That room seemed foggy when I opened the door. What happened in there? Like she was really calm. I wasn't expecting that. And I had a moment where I was like, I don't know if I want to say this or not, but I'm just going to say it because if anybody will believe me, it's my very faithful dad. And so I told him what happened and I was like, Dad, I think maybe I prayed an angel into the room. And I told him what happened. And he's driving and he all of a sudden just kind of looks over at me and he just smiles and he goes, that makes sense. And I was like, no, it doesn't. I have 800 million questions. And I went on to ask those questions of many pastors and hospice nurses and caregivers. And they all said, oh yeah, that makes sense. So apparently that is something that can happen. But that was one of those moments where I was like, God totally heard me. It was like a real angel. If that doesn't solidify your beliefs, I don't know what will. It was seriously one of the, you can call me crazy. You can say that was a hallucination, that I had a panic attack, whatever. I know what happened. It was beautiful. And if anybody deserved an angel comforting and protecting him, it was her. And I was like, when Dad confirmed it, I was just like, thank you, God. Like, seriously, she needed that. He needed that. Like, I was so grateful. And it was just one of those very moving moments for me in my faith. And again, in mom's dementia journey, it just rejuvenated my belief that, like, he is hearing our cries, he is helping her. And so I really, again, at that time, dug into that. And then we had quite literally like one of the biggest miracles, like most inexplicable miracles. Dad and I call it the Lazarus moment. Oh my gosh, this one is, you can't explain it. This was all God. So after I prayed the angel into the room, and mom stayed in that facility for, I don't know, it was maybe a year. But in that time, she rapidly went downhill. She went from being able to talk at least a little and shuffle step to just, she couldn't move. In fact, her spine, like at her neck, bent down and twisted sideways. And so that her chin was actually like just permanently fused down almost on her chest. We could lift it. She could not. Like, you could pull it back, but there was so much tension. Her traps were super tight. Her whole body had just atrophied. And there was like no muscle tone. And so things just progressed pretty quickly. We got to a point where hospice had been in there and helping with her. And she went into kind of a comatose state. She was like no longer responsive. She couldn't move. She was just in what we call a comatose state. And at that point, I come in from Houston and come down here to meet with the hospice lady that day. And she's like giving us all the paperwork, like kind of the end of life stuff. And she said, you have days to maybe a week left based on where she is right now. At that point, we were, 8 years into this diagnosis and far more than that into symptoms. And Dad and I both were just like, hey, as long as she doesn't hurt, okay, take her, Lord. But there was a timeline problem. The pastor was out of town. Mom's pastor and dear friend, who is his wife, were out of town on a cruise. And so when the hospice lady tells us that she maybe has a week left, one of the first things my dad says is, oh no, pastor's out of town. Like, I don't know when they get back from their cruise. It's like all the way up in Alaska. And this is how much God hears this and listens to us and listens to my mom. Because we said that, and I laughingly said, oh, okay, Dad, we'll be praying that she lives long enough for pastor to get home and bury her. Like, what? Are you kidding me? And Dad's, yeah, she's got it. Like, she's got to make it for this. And I am not kidding you. Which was like maybe 2 or 3 days after that. I'm sitting in the bed with her, reading to her from the Bible, which was like mom's favorite thing to do. So I'm like saying my goodbyes and reading to her from the Bible. And I crawled in the bed with her, and I'd been reading for about an hour. And she was still in that comatose state, eyes closed and everything. And I'm reading from the Bible, but I had to pee. And so I go to get off the bed, and as I like sat up, I was like, I'll be right back, Mom. I gotta stop reading for a second. I'll be right back. I've got to go to the bathroom. And I wasn't looking at her. I was turned away because I had to slide off the bed. And I heard something, and I was like, no way. And I turned back and looked at her, and her eyes were open, and she said, she looked at me and she said, don't stop. The way I jumped back into that bed, and we both peed in it, because I did not stop reading that Bible to her until my dad showed up 2 hours later. I was so shocked. But literally after that, my dad just said he was with her pretty much nonstop and said she just is waking up more and more. And so we're thinking like that end surge, right? We're just gonna come back a little bit and then she's gone. Not my mom. Not my mom. I get a call from my dad about 10 days after we've been told she had a week left. And he said, you're not going to believe this. Your mom stood up today. Looked up at me and stood up today. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, I had her on the potty. I'd put her on the potty to change her and everything. And I had her sitting there on that chair, And I turned to do something. And when I turned back around, she had put her arms down, which my mom's arms were locked in this position and her head locked down. He said she had her arms and hands down on the arms of the chair and pushed herself up and stood up and lifted her head up and looked at me. He said it was like Lazarus rising from the dead. And we were so stunned. And again, both of us were like, was this the final push? It was not. It was not. My mother like ended up getting better and better for months after that. She actually got all the way back to where she could shuffle walk and verbalize and talk a little bit. She came back from that like Lazarus from the dead. It was crazy. And I gave Dad such a hard time years and years later because she lived another 15, I think, to 20, like another 15 years at least after that moment where she had been given days left. And I gave my dad such a hard time. I was like, it is all your fault. I don't complain about any of your circumstances because it's your fault. She's still alive here 20 years later because you prayed that she would live for the pastor to do her funeral. Here you go. And so it was just, there were so many moments like that. And then when we got her back home, Dad ended up ultimately just taking her back home and caring for her. That became a big problem as well. Eventually, she did lose the ability to walk again and needed a wheelchair, and she required being lifted and to be moved and stuff like that. And the house that they had just didn't, it was not set up for that and that level of care. And Dad just really needed like full-time or more help. And so again, I'm like, thank you, God, like for having her here, but please, we need some help. Show me what to do. What are we supposed to do? You let her live. Now, what are we supposed to do? We need some help. And in walks the biggest angel of the. About the time Dad was really desperate for help and we were trying to figure this situation out, the facility that Mom had been in closed, and the director of that facility needed a job, and Dad just asked her like, hey, are you willing to come help me with this? And she said yes. And bless her heart, she did not know what she was getting into, but I'm so glad she did. But it was again that divine timing, and she was perfect for what we needed. She never said no to the crazy shit we were doing, like going on road trips and going skiing. She was on board for anything. She actually lived out here in the RV with my parents, which is a tiny RV, while we built the house that they actually needed to facilitate Mom's care needs. Now, in those years of building that house and taking care of Mom like that and out here on the farm played big in my grief journey, in my widowhood, because it was in those years when we were out here at the farm helping with her and being down here on the weekends and building the house for them down here. I have such amazing memories of my husband with our kids and doing things. And I know that my kids have those same amazing memories of doing things with their dad and learning things from him. We lived in the bougie part of Houston. We very easily could have said, no, we're staying in town, go bar hopping with friends and let the kids go party and do whatever. But we didn't. We always came down here to the farm, and the kids wanted to. They loved being down here. They loved doing those things and building things and riding their motorcycles and working on things with their dad. And Jeff enjoyed it. It was a time in my marriage where I was so grateful for the man that I married, because how many husbands are willing to do the things that he did for my mother? He would pick her up and carry her. He never said, no, that road trip, that would just be too, like, way too much with her. Never, not once. He was always on board, always there to help do stuff with her, with the kids, to help my dad. It was incredible. And I told him all the time, you are just an absolute superhero. Like, I'm buying you Superman PJs for Christmas because I don't know too many people that would do what you're doing and putting up with. And I like appreciate you so much. And I would not have had that those great moments and that appreciation for him, for our marriage, for what we had and who he was. And neither would my kids if mom hadn't had dementia, if we hadn't made caring for her a priority. That was, in my mind, such a huge part of it because I cherish those memories. When I am missing Jeff and I miss his laugh or his smile, it is those memories that pop up first in my head of Jeff and the kids building stuff, of them laughing, of everybody singing in the truck, the Live Like You Were Dying song, and how much that has played out throughout my widowhood, and not just for me, but also for every single person that was in that truck that night. So it was definitely mom's dementia and the God moments that happened really solidified my faith and my just ability and capacity to be grateful in the moment and to make memories and know that it was important to do those things. And I'm so very grateful to it because we did that. And I would not have any of that with my husband, with my children, if it weren't for mom's dementia, because by the time my kids were 21 and 23, Jeff had died. That's usually about the time when you start making memory with your kids, or at least for the dads, because they've been at work all this time and now they're retiring and here you go, you can spend time with the kids. Jeff had done that, thankfully. And so I'm very grateful to mom's dementia journey. It gave great, huge purpose for me to mom's dementia. And I was like grateful to God for that for sure. So all of those things that happened during mom's dementia journey and moments and memories, they all said to me, like, God definitely hears my prayers. He hears what's on our heart. He's hearing the struggles. Like, he's maybe not answering them the way I want or in my timeline, but he is definitely here. He is present and he is sending help when he can. And so when Jeff actually died, in 2016, my mom was still alive. My mom actually only passed 4 years ago, and I'm almost 9 years into this. I never lost my faith. I never lost my belief that God heard my pain, my cries, my anguish, my stress, my fear. I was praying to him nonstop. And even when people were like, your husband's in hell. No, first of all, he's not. Show me, where does it say that? Like, I wanted to know, like, where does it say that? Because I did remember having read it, like, somewhere at some point. I knew that was part of my beliefs. But I was leaning on God the whole time. What I was questioning was my beliefs, what I had been taught, what I had been raised with. Why does everyone think he's in hell? Because I did not believe that, not for 1 second. I did not believe God would send a man like that, like a man that had done all of those things, all of those amazing things, and been such an amazing husband, father, son-in-law. How? No, he's not in hell. He suffered his hell here. And so I was like, prove it, where is it? And I started to dig in. First, of course, I asked my dad. That was the first phone call. I'm like, what? You show me in the Bible where it says that, because I know I read it somewhere, but I can't find it anywhere in here. And so Dad's, it's not in there. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, it's not in there. And so I called the pastor that we prayed mom would live until he got home. I called him. He was kind of my childhood go-to pastor. And so I called him and I was like, where is this in the Bible that says that Jeff is in hell? Like, I know I read it somewhere. And he said, you did not read it in the Bible, though. You read it in your catechism when you took confirmation. So then, of course, we had a whole discussion about that. And I'm like, what? But it's part of the Bible, right? Because it's in the catechism. And he said, no, not exactly. There was like this Pope back in the 1300s, and he made that the mortal sin. Like, he named that the mortal sin and said you were going to hell. It's not actually in the Bible. And I was just like, what? Like, I knew he wasn't in hell. Like, first I was like, I knew it. But then I was just like, wait, what? So I have fallen out with my church, I guess, my religion, but never, ever my faith. Now, I did leave the church I was born and raised in, the Lutheran church. I stepped away, and at one point early in my widowhood, and this is one more example of God definitely hears what I am praying and saying. Because I had said when I left the Lutheran church, if I ever willingly go back to the church and like I'm open hearted and excited to be there, lightning will strike. God heard that. So did my dad, actually. I said that to him too. So while I still had like all my faith and everything and working on my beliefs and whatnot, I had repeatedly said, if I willingly go back to church, like lightning is going to strike. And it did. It did. That happened recently. So I actually, here at the local Lutheran church, there was a pastor that Dad had gotten really close to, and we had gotten like close to he and his wife and everything. And that I had actually, again, on a church level, connected with for the first time in many years. That had just not happened. But he was very compassionate, kind, and understanding, and somebody that I could talk to and I didn't feel like judged about it. And it was nice. So it was like, you're the closest one to ever get me back into church. He invited me to Bible study and I went because I love Bible studies. I think they're great. But he was moving to a different post, new church. And so it was going to be his last service here locally. And so I decided, because, all right, Dad really admired him. Everybody in town, he was a great guy, connected me with the church again, that took some effort. So that was a dedication, man. But so I was like, oh, I'm going to show up for his last service. Now, my son said the same thing. My youngest son had the same relationship going on with the whole church situation. But even he was like, I really admire this guy. I'm going to show up for this last service too. Like, last chance to see him do it. Like, all right, let's do it. So we go to church and I was there. I was excited to be there. I was like, all right, back in church. Like, he did it. Yay, look at me. I forgot about that conversation that I had with God there for a few minutes. So I was glad to be there. It was great service, and communion rolled around, and I'm sitting between my dad and my son, and they both like look at me and they're like, are you gonna get up for communion? And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to communion. First time, like, probably since my husband died, literally. Again, not thinking about it, I was like, I'm here for it. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the spirit, man. And so I take communion. We have a great service. Everything went awesome. It was a beautiful day outside. My son and I ran to the next town over and grabbed groceries together and a coffee. And we were talking about how, man, we're glad we did that. Again, gorgeous day. Clear, beautiful blue sky. Beautiful day. We get home and I was in the house working on some stuff. And I did not realize it. All of a sudden, I'm like, gosh, it got dark in here. That's weird. Like, it's not that late. And out of nowhere, what had been a beautiful blue sky day turned into a lightning storm. Like, all of a sudden, just lightning strike after lightning strike, very close. And I was like, oh shit, and I'm like unplugging stuff, and it is hitting closer and closer. And I was like, what in the hell? Like, where did this even come from? And the next thing I know, I hear boom, and all the power goes out. And I was like, shit, my house got hit. And I hear boom, like another second later, and everything surged really bad again. And then a second later, I heard a really loud boom, but a little further away. And I went, oh my God, lightning literally just struck my house, my son and my dad's. And I get on the phone and call my dad. I'm like, hey, are you okay? Did that hit your house? And he's, yeah, it did. How about you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm hit too. And he pauses and he goes, lightning struck. It struck my house. It struck your house. I said, yeah, I came in too. And he goes, this is all your fault, because you went to church today and you took communion. You said lightning would strike. I think God heard you. And I said, but it means I went with an open, willing heart, right? Yeah. there's a lot of God in my grief journey, a lot of beautiful moments thanks to dementia and my mom and the beautiful presence that she was. That is going to have to wrap it up for this little episode. I will get to the guts and grace of it all on another one. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed a little bit of my grief journey and my mom's dementia journey. And I hope that maybe you can find a little hope or inspiration in there too. Maybe I can give you a little more God, guts, and grace. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Widow Wit and Wisdom. I can't wait to see you next time. Please remember to like, follow, comment, subscribe, share it with anyone who may need just a little bit more light in their day. And always remember to be the light in someone's day, even if it's your own.